Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Please subscribe and keep watching more details. Did Cruz and Herrmann completely forget about Casey and Dawson in Chicago Fire? Kid and Severide's adoption storyline isn't the first time that this has been done in Chicago Fire. However, Cruz and Herrmann seem to forget about the first time. During Chicago Fire Season 13, Episode 15, Kid and Severide met with the caseworker about getting approved as adoptive parents. It was a nervous time for the two of them, and Cruz and Herrmann ended up getting involved due to their mistake when it came to a video call still potentially connected. The two decided to go see the caseworker in person and explain the situation. While their visit wasn't necessary in the end, it was something that helped Kid and Severide get the good news they needed. However, the two seemed to forget that Cruz isn't the first person at the firehouse to go the adoption route. Cruz mentioned to Herrmann that the high-risk job can be seen as a problem for adoption. He shared with Herrmann that the caseworker, when it came to him and Chloe adopting Chloe, wasn't too certain about Cruz being in the right line of work due to the high-risk nature of the job. It was Chloe's safer job that helped them get approved. As 911 Lone Star fans know, TK and Carlos being in high-risk jobs did lead to them initially not being recommended to take in Jonah. TK ended up quitting his job to become a full-time dad to his half-brother, so it seemed like maybe Cruz had a point. However, Chicago Fire has already done the adoption storyline. Casey and Dawson were both approved, and I don't remember their high-risk jobs getting in the way of that approval. I guess this will depend on the social worker that is on the case. Some will see the job as too much of a risk, while others will accept that while there is a higher risk of death can call on anyone at any time. Just look at how Monica Pascal was the one killed at the end of Chicago Fire Season 13, Episode 15. I don't think I'd mind Cruz bringing his situation up as much if there was a line from Herrmann about Casey and Dawson. After all, Cruz's personal experience will always sit at the top of his mind. Herrmann should have remembered that two of their own had been through this before. In the fast-paced world of Firehouse 51, Joe Cruz and Christopher Herrmann had always been known for their camaraderie and close-knit bond. The two men had been through countless dangerous rescues, heart-wrenching tragedies, and triumphs. Their friendship was forged in the fires of those life-or-death moments, and over the years they had become more like family than colleagues. But on one particular evening, as the firehouse buzzed with activity, a question lingered in the air. Did Cruz and Herrmann completely forget about Casey and Dawson? It had been a few months since Casey's departure from Firehouse 51. The sudden absence of their leader left a palpable void. Matt Casey, the stalwart captain who had led them through thick and thin, had made the decision to move to Oregon to be with his late best friend's son, leaving the team in flux. His exit had shaken everyone, but none more than Herrmann, who had been like a big brother to Casey since day one. They had shared a bond, one that transcended the firehouse. A bond that had been tested over the years but had always come out stronger. Dawson's departure was a different matter entirely. Sylvie Brett, the paramedic who had replaced her, had filled the space left by Dawson's absence in the paramedic unit, but the emotional impact of Dawson leaving for her new life had left its mark. Dawson, a passionate and driven paramedic, had found herself at a crossroads, and her decision to leave Chicago was a difficult one. Her departure had been quiet, leaving behind memories of late-night talks, shared glances, and moments of silent understanding. But now Cruz and Herrmann seemed to be in their own world, going about their daily routines with a sense of normalcy that made it feel as though the two former firefighters had simply faded into the background of Firehouse 51's history. When the subject of Casey and Dawson came up, Cruz would mutter something about their old friends, but his attention would quickly turn to something else. Herrmann, ever the talkative one, had a tendency to avoid deeper discussions about those two, preferring to focus on the team at hand rather than dwell on what had been lost. It wasn't that Cruz and Herrmann had forgotten about their friends entirely. No, it was more complicated than that. They had carried the weight of their departures for a while, each man quietly processing the changes in their own way. Cruz had buried himself in work, staying busy with calls and training drills, always trying to stay one step ahead of the next tragedy. Herrmann had become more invested in his family life, spending time at home with his wife and kids, seeking solace in the safety and familiarity of his loved ones. But even amidst the business of their lives, both men felt the absence. The truth was, Cruz and Herrmann were grieving, albeit in a way that was hard to see. The firehouse had always been their sanctuary, a place where they could channel their emotions and find purpose. But with Casey and Dawson gone, that sense of purpose had become muddled. Without Casey's leadership, there was a subtle shift in the way the team operated, and without Dawson's warmth and unwavering compassion, there was a sense of coldness that occasionally swept through the paramedic team. It wasn't intentional, but it was real. For Herrmann, it was the little things that reminded him of Casey. The way the captain's voice used to ring out across the firehouse, commanding attention with ease, was now replaced by the sound of Cruz's animated chatter and the occasional authoritative commands from the acting captain. Herrmann missed the moments when he and Casey would lock eyes across the room, silently agreeing on a course of action without a word being spoken. He missed Casey's constant presence, the way the two of them would argue over trivial matters only to have a laugh later over a drink. It was as though Casey's absence had left a hole in Herrmann's routine, and no matter how much he tried to fill it with other distractions, it remained. Cruz, too, felt the loss of Casey and Dawson in ways that were less obvious. He found himself thinking about their friendship at odd times, like when he was fixing a broken piece of equipment or cleaning the fire truck after a long shift. It wasn't that he had forgotten about them, but in the chaos of the firehouse, it was easy to let the memories slip into the background. He had always been a forward thinker, but sometimes even Cruz had moments when he wondered if he had neglected the past too much. However, the moment that truly solidified the idea that Cruz and Herrmann had buried their feelings came when they responded to a call late one night. The scene was chaotic, as usual. Firefighters scrambled to contain the flames, paramedics tended to the wounded, and everyone was doing their part. It was when the call came in for a young woman who had been severely burned that Herrmann and Cruz found themselves in the thick of it. As they worked to stabilize the woman, Herrmann looked over at Cruz and caught a glimpse of something unfamiliar in his eyes, a flicker of emotion that didn't belong in the middle of a crisis. "Hey, okay?" Herrmann asked, his voice softer than usual. Cruz didn't answer right away. His focus was on the patient, but his mind seemed elsewhere. Finally, he met Herrmann's gaze, offering a faint smile. "Yeah, just thinking about Casey and Dawson." Herrmann paused, his expression softening. "You miss them, don't you?" Cruz nodded, his lips pressed into a thin line. "We both do. But they're gone now. We just have to keep moving forward." Herrmann let out a long sigh, the weight of his words hanging in the air. "Yeah, I know. But sometimes I feel like we've let them slip away without even realizing it. Like we've forgotten them." The words stung, not because they were untrue, but because they hit a nerve that neither of them wanted to acknowledge. Cruz and Herrmann had tried to move on, to continue the daily grind of firehouse life, but in doing so, they had inadvertently buried their grief beneath the weight of their duties. It wasn't that they had forgotten about Casey and Dawson, it was that they had learned how to live without them, and sometimes that felt like betrayal. As the night continued, Cruz and Herrmann worked side by side, their usual banter quiet but still present. They didn't need to say much. The unspoken understanding between them was enough. They had each other, and that, in the end, was what kept them going. But as the sun began to rise over the city, casting a golden light on Firehouse 51, it was clear that Cruz and Herrmann had not forgotten. They had simply learned to live with the absence of their friends, carrying their memories forward in ways they hadn't fully understood until that moment.